So, wait, are we live?
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me.
How's it going, man?
Good. I got a bunch of bullet points I want to sit here and talk about, but first, let everybody know who you are and what you got going on.
Well, my name is Austin DUGGAN. I am the founder of Chimera BMX. We make a super fast, super powerful, super lightweight electric BMX.
Cool. What got you into that? Like, where did this passion start? Like, was it in BMX in the 80s? Did you strap motors on bikes? Did you see people that do that? What inspired you?
Well, I didn't strap a motor to a bike until, I started working on a good solution to get through LA traffic.
Okay.
Right? So that was after I moved here. I think it was probably 2019 or something. That's the first time I ever strapped a motor to a bike. But my first bicycle as a kid was a BMX, and I never changed. Like, I rode...
What kind of bike was it?
So my first bike was a Schwinn BMX. It wasn't anything too nice. My dad bought it for me. Honestly, I was barely making memories when he got me that thing, because he used to ride motocross and he used to race, bicycles and stuff. Before there was even BMX, there was those big Schwinns with all the curves.
Yeah.
And so that's why he got me a Schwinn.
So the banana seats?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he could wheelie for miles as long as he had the banana seat. It was something
about the back on it.
Yeah, exactly. And he used to do that all around the neighborhood. So he got me a Schwinn that was way too big for me. It was a full size. It was a 20-inch, but it was still for an adult, adult size. And he put me on that as a kid with training wheels, and I couldn't even reach the pedals really. I was scooting around. So he had the seat low and he had the handlebars back, and he's like, "You'll grow into it," And I remember he took the training wheels off and tried to teach me how to pedal it on concrete. And he just put me on the bike and he pushed and he was like, "Pedal, balance." And I remember falling and skinning, this is the 80s, so I was skinning my knees and my elbows and stuff, but it was it was a good lesson in falling as part of the process.
Well, I kind of remember those things when I was younger. I remember training wheels being so easy and cheap, in the sense where they were easy to get off. My dad wouldn't take my training wheels off, so I bent them or pulled them back because you could swivel them on the axle, and they would just be sitting there almost at that point then wheelie bars, basically, the way because they stick out like this. I just bent them backwards like this to be able to ride.
Smart.
Yeah, times have changed, man. Now you got balance bikes for kids, and by the time they're 6 or 7 years old, they're riding little baby e-bikes.
Yeah.
So what after that, in your experience with your dad and riding on training wheels and getting all skinned up, when you got into the BMX world, what age were you and kind of what riders were you looking up to at the time?
Well, so I grew up in a small town outside of Nashville. Right?
Okay.
Very small town, Gallatin, Tennessee. And my house was actually outside of that town. So we were in a township. It was unincorporated. And because of that, I didn't have cable. I didn't grow up with cable. And, the outside world was kind of we were isolated from it out there in the country. Mm-hmm. And so the only time I ever accessed what was going on in the BMX world was when, on those rare occasions in which my mom would drive us to the mall, which was an hour away and 2 towns over. And I could go into the bookstore in the mall and look at BMX Plus.
Okay.
Right. And of course, Hoffman, Mira, all the big names, and I would see that stuff, but I couldn't follow it along because, that was the only access we had. And so instead, BMX for me was getting on bikes, building dirt jumps in the yard, and just doing the dumbest, craziest stuff we could come up with.
I feel like that's a lot of people growing up.
That was
cinder
just
blocks and plywood.
Exactly, man. And so it was I remember it was probably 1992 or 3, it might have been 3. So I was 13 years old when I got rid of the Schwinn and got a GT Performer, and I got it. I think we got it as a deal because it was a year older. It was the 92 model, right? And it was whenever they came out with the GT Performer that was a dark red, and I got that one. And I remember getting that and checking out Dan's Comp. I would get that in the mail.
Yeah.
And that was the first bike that I really started to trick out. You see, I grew up with my dad building muscle cars. And so he was always, I think a lot of people had this experience with their dads where it was just like, hold the flashlight, hand me that wrench, right?
So you learned that way and how to be real mechanically inclined.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
And so the GT Performer was the first thing that I tricked out. You know, I was like, I swapped out the cranks and the handlebars, and I was like, changed the brakes on it and all this stuff. And then from there, actually built a bike from scratch, like ordered.
That's the best feeling.
It's
like,
so cool,
like
man.
those days getting those like dance comp catalogs are like little baby catalogs, and you just go through and be like, I want that frame circle.
Yep.
I want those Odyssey Powerlight cranks. I remember those like little Powerlight cranks that you had. You piece together a bike, next thing you know, you're like, I'm like $900 in right now. This is insane.
Yeah, like
that was also the days where you could like order a bike or bike parts. I remember this. I think it was called like paid on delivery. Remember that with UPS?
Yes.
Where you could hand cash to a delivery driver.
Yep.
You wouldn't have to, there was no way to like, there was no online payment. It was just like, okay, I want this, and you're ordering on the catalog. Yeah, I'll pay when the UPS driver arrives.
Yep.
Those were the days, man.
Yeah, it was either that or you had to mail them a check.
Yeah.
Right? You had to hand write a check and mail it to them. And I remember I had the bike that I built was an Elf Pro. Do you remember that company?
Yeah, Elf. Heck yeah, I remember Elf.
I did an Elf Pro, and I loved their blast bars.
Okay.
You know, it was like everybody likes the 4-piece. That was a 6-piece.
Yeah, I remember
design, that. Right? It was like there were no curves on it. It was all straight.
It was almost
angles.
like a competition at that time. You had 2-piece, 4-piece, and the people were doing weird angles. And I remember those bars came out, and it's like, what's the purpose of this? But they look cool.
They looked cool, you know. And I was young enough, like you know, the performance aspect wasn't as big of a deal as like how cool they looked.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my parents didn't splurge on much because you know we didn't have a ton of money, but my dad would support my bike habit because he was into it, you know.
Yeah.
And so I got that, and I remember I had the profile cranks, and that was the first time I laced my own wheels. You know,
are these like Sun Ringle triple wall rims back then?
It was it was the ones that had I can't remember if it was the Sunringle or the like Araya, but it was the ones that if you're looking at the profile, it had like the 2 bumps, right, and then it kind of flared up at the sides. It was whatever those rims were, and I remember
they might even were they Peregrine? Remember those?
I don't remember the brand name. I want to say they were Araya for some reason, but
okay.
If I saw the profile,
if anybody watching this knows as we're describing, definitely let us know.
Yeah, but the entire bike, everything I insisted on, everything was chrome, or if it was aluminum, I'd make sure it was just like raw silver aluminum.
Yeah.
And then a couple splashes of blue. I had like blue pedals and blue grips. You know, it's just like, you know, but it was the joy of like building a bike that you rode. And what was crazy about that bike is I actually brought it with me to college, and then all the way when I moved to Brooklyn, and I was in my 20s riding this bike that I built when I was like
You still
15.
have it now?
Nah, it's gone now.
Damn.
It's gone now.
Did it get stolen, or did you have to get rid of it?
It wound up being thrown on a neighboring rooftop at a crazy party.
Oh my God, you just never retrieved.
And I just couldn't get it out. It was like on the rooftop of a church, actually.
It could still be there now.
It might still be there now. If anybody in Brooklyn is in the McKibbin Lofts and you look at that church across the way and there's a bike, that's my bike.
That'd be amazing. Yeah. Retrieve it. We got a reward. I got one here. It says, what inspired the brand Chimera, and what goal was from the start, and how has that goal changed today?
Okay, so the goal at the time was to build a fast, lightweight electric bicycle that was easy to work on, easy to customize, easy to repair for me, so that I could get from my apartment in Koreatown, Los Angeles to downtown LA, which is like 4.5 miles, cut through all the traffic, right?
Which the traffic is like 2 hours.
Traffic is insane. You're like, that's almost an hour, right?
Yeah.
Cut through all the traffic so I could get to public transportation and have something I could just like bring on, right? It had to be small and lightweight, right?
So that's why you went with BMX besides your roots?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was, of course I wanted a BMX anyway, just because I knew that something electric would be super, fun if it was a BMX, but also small and lightweight, right?
Yeah.
So I could bring it on public transit so that I could get to work, which was all the way down in Fullerton, right? So I take the train and it drops me off 4 miles from work. And so that was an 8-mile trip.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, well, I don't need a huge battery pack, but it does need to output a lot of power, right? So with the same battery pack that we have today, the 52 volt, that's only 9 amp hours, if you are throttling it like you stole it at absolute full power, you get about 8 miles. And that's why.
So when you started this, did you already have a background in understanding how the battery chemistry works? how to build your own cell packs? Or is this all brand new from the get-go for you?
Yeah, I knew nothing. I knew nothing about that. I had never ridden an electric bicycle. The first electric bicycle I ever rode was one I built.
Interesting. So you didn't even have anything to kind of go off of to be like, no, I don't want this. But you knew exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
That's an interesting way of going about it. I mean, also, you know what you like. So, I mean, it's tried and true. The thing's still over there kicking. It's so close to the original prototype when I first met you.
Yeah.
And that's also a good telling sign that your vision came to life from exactly what you pictured.
Yeah, it was, I mean, there was a lot of experimentation, and the first bike I ever built, it was a conversion kit, right? So I took, because what happened was when I got to Brooklyn with that 20-inch, commuting on a 20-inch is not fun.
Yeah.
Right? And after that bike sort of disappeared, it was a little further on, Jim Ciolenki, he had switched over to a 24-inch. And Sunday started making frames that were 24 inches, but were not race geometry, because all those 24-inch bikes were race geometry, and it was like the longer stays and the low bottom bracket, so it felt sluggish, you know. And I had a few of those that I was riding in Brooklyn, but what I really liked was when they switched to that freestyle geometry. I got on that and I was like, you can actually commute on a BMX if it's 24 and still have the maneuverability and the responsiveness if it has that geometry. I mention all that because that's the frame that I originally attached a motor to. I got a hold of the Bafang BBS HD. So for all you nerds out there who know about e-bikes know that that's like a pretty substantial, like game-changing conversion kit in the industry sort of early on.
You have pictures of these?
I do. I can give you
I'll
some
overlay
pictures
them in this as he's talking.
Yeah. And as soon as I got that motor, before I even put it on the bike, I was like, there's a lot of useless stuff on this motor. I don't need pedal assist. I don't need a display. I don't need all this extra wiring. I don't need brake cutoffs. I just need a throttle. And so before I even put it on the bike, I dismantled it and figured out how it worked and ripped all that stuff out, sort of gutted it, and then built a battery pack, strapped it to the bike, enjoyed it, but realized it wasn't powerful enough. And so that's when I got into finding these aftermarket controllers that could get a lot more juice out of these pretty substantial battery packs I was building.
That's interesting, though, because like you said, you've never built a battery pack before. How does one go about trial and error? Like, you didn't have any knowledge?
No, but just the way my mind works, like, as a kid, just to give you an example, like, my grandfather bought me a remote-controlled truck. Remember those back in the 80s?
Little RCs, yep.
Yeah. And, I was pretty young. And it was a big deal because, he didn't have a lot of money either, right? He was in the workers' union driving trucks over in Detroit, Michigan, which is where I was born. So he buys me this thing. I play with it for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, this is amazing. I need to take it apart and figure out how it works.
So you like to reverse engineer stuff?
I reverse engineer. It's just like how my brain works when I look at things that are mechanical or electrical.
That works with anything that you look at, too. I guess whenever we were at the expo recently, you see a bike, another bike that's interesting, or any motorcycle that's interesting, you're almost looking at it from the engineering perspective each time. Gotcha.
Yeah. And I'm also very DIY. Like, every piece of furniture in my apartment, I made. That's just part of my nature, right? So even though it is true, like, I had never built a battery pack, I didn't know much about it, I had never done a conversion or anything like that, I kind of have that skill set where I can just sit and look at things and go through all those forums online and, slowly take something apart, and I can figure it out.
Because when it comes to the batteries, with all the certifications and regulations and stuff, it's like more and more people are pulling battery packs apart and tinkering with them, but they might not have like an analytical mind that you have. So is it difficult, or is it very easy to mess up for a first timer to just kind of open up a casing?
Yeah,
kind of get into it.
It's very easy to mess up, and I would advise anybody against opening up a pack. And that's something, fortunately, I didn't do. Instead, I just looked at, like, well, if one was to build a pack from scratch, how would you do it? And fortunately, there was Endless Sphere it's a pretty old forum for EV builders, and it's been around for a while, and there's just a wealth of information about, like, if you're building your own battery pack or you're doing a conversion or, whatever, there's all these makers who have gone through these pains of, practically burning down their house, building this stuff. And so you can learn on their mistakes.
Gotcha.
And fortunately, I never started a fire. I burnt my finger once, right? But other than that, the battery packs that I first built, they weren't the safest, but they were safe enough for what I was doing.
And then they evolved.
And they evolved, yes.
Yeah, I feel like you also have come with a lot of patience with what you're doing too.
Yes. I don't want to make it sound like it was just easy for me, right? Like, a couple months I had a bike. No, this is years. This was years of iterating and having setbacks and finding out that, the idea that you thought was going to be the breakthrough and make everything work was in fact a terrible idea, and it didn't work at all. And you have to go back to the drawing board. There was a lot of that,
Well, businesses start from ideas. So how many ideas have you had that have formulated into a business, or is this your first business?
This is my first business.
How's it going? How are you feeling about it so far?
I feel good about it. It's definitely a huge challenge. I don't recommend it to people just launching a business,
You have to have the right mindset for it. And I feel like everybody, take it from me, everybody's capable of it. You just have to want it. And you have to be willing to sacrifice certain things that you're really comfortable with. They're everyday comfortable things in your life. You have to be willing to sacrifice those things. But when it comes to starting the business and then to where you are now, how many years are we looking at? Are we looking at 4 years in now?
Let's see. I registered the business in 2021.
Okay.
So
from like start to now, I mean, in the beginning, it's always like you're literally flying by the seat of your pants. You're like, I don't know what I'm doing. Oh, I got to do this paperwork. Now it's kind of, you have a regimen to the things.
Yeah, a little bit.
Do you allocate any certain parts of your business to anyone, or is it all you?
It's mostly me at this point. Fortunately, in the prototyping process, especially the design process where I was, drawing everything up and putting everything in 3D, so I could find manufacturing partners and things like that.
See, that's another thing. Not a lot of people, like right there, you broke down, you took apart a motor, you took apart a battery pack, you're reverse engineering, you're doing CAD. And building stuff out. Not a lot of people have that. No, like I'm self-taught when it came to CAD, and I'm sure I don't know anywhere near as much as you. Did you go to school for something like that? How did you learn that?
No. So I worked with Nick Nieminen. He is one of the engineers who helped start up Monday Motorbikes.
Okay, yeah.
And he was an old friend from grad school, and he saw that Frankenstein bike that I had built, the Sunday, and he didn't believe the stats. Or he was really impressed with him, and he was a little skeptical because I think at that time it was like 42 and a half pounds, but I was hitting over 40 miles per hour on it. And he was like, I don't understand how you've got so much power to weight. Like, what's going on there? And he came to visit. He's up in San Francisco, and he rode the bike. Actually, I can send you the clip.
Yeah, definitely.
When he rode, he came back and he was like, this is no joke.
Yeah.
And I sat down with him and I said, yeah, but it's a Frankenstein. I said, I have an idea that's actually a different drive system that will decrease the weight even more and increase the power even more, and it'll be easier to work on and, more sleek. And he was game. He was game to help me put it into SolidWorks because I had never touched a 3D design program. And I knew that the learning curve was high. And so the initial frame and then, bike CAD, he did that. And I love working with him and still work with him.
Is he the type of person that like you have such an idea? I have a friend that's like I relay information to where I'm like, I have an idea here, but I don't know how to get it there. But because I tell him, he's like on the same wavelength. He literally does everything. Like he'll put it up on there, design it all up. I'm like, that's exactly what I was visualizing. Yeah, is that the way Nick is?
Yeah. Okay. Now, of course, I mean, I can draw stuff up, and I know I can give him exact dimensions. But he was able to draw up all that stuff so much quicker than I would have been able to.
Yeah.
Now, eventually, because I'm impatient and I want to be able to tweak everything myself, like, one night I set aside the entire night and I sat down and I taught myself the basics of SolidWorks, and then every, day for 30 minutes to an hour since then for like a month or 2 months, I don't know exactly what it was, I would sit down and I would have little goals for myself. Let me learn the next thing.
Gotcha.
And now I'm full blown, like I can do SolidWorks stuff.
So would you say that's one of the hardest parts about owning a business is self-teaching everything?
You have to wear way too many hats. You have to wear way too many. And so at any given moment, there are so many things that you have to do, you simply won't get done with all of the things that you really need to get done with. And it's a little bit more of a psychological ability to just say, like, I can handle that feeling of being overwhelmed all the time. But if, like I say, in the early days, I had Nick's help, and then Christine Wu was a big help during the Indiegogo campaign. She helped, do a lot of the graphic design stuff, that, again, I ended up learning a lot of that, especially, watching how she did it, but I didn't have time to do that at the time.
Now, is that a mentality where it's almost like a controlling aspect of, because I have that feeling too with owning a business, I have a hard time relinquishing certain tasks that, like, I really want to do that thing. Is that kind of something you have too? I
have a little bit of that. But with a lot of that stuff, like I would love to be able to afford someone to do that full time, like all the graphic design stuff. I give them maybe just like, look, things should look like this. They should
so you give them full freedom after that,
but give them the freedom to do it, especially when someone's really talented. And we'll get there. It's looking like we'll get there. I'll be able to hire a lot of that stuff out. But at the moment, now that I've got a little bit of a well-oiled machine for this, it's basically just me, and I have a little help here and there every now and again.
What's one thing you wish you knew before you started the business that you know now? And is there one moment within it that's been like, this is what's actually motivated me the most within the business? Like sometimes there's like a failure or a letdown with a call or a client or sourcing something. I'm just using examples there. That could be like, that's the moment that drove you the hardest. Are there anything like that where you kind of wish you knew something right when you started the business that could have made it just so much easier? Or are you just happy that you went through those hardships because otherwise you wouldn't be where you are now?
There's some of the hardships that I'm happy I went through, but for the most part, there's a lot of hardships I wish I didn't have to go through. Because I look at other companies that they either, the founder either had a pile of cash that they could, throw at people to help them, or they just had a big group of people to help them, or they had investors, and I didn't have any of that.
But you know what you have though? I feel like you have more love for what you do than a lot of them. Because I've my experience with like people that have a pile of cash, they like the space, they like the idea of whatever it be, riding a bike or a scooter or skateboard, but there's a different love and drive when you don't have all that, but you're working for every little bit to it. Yeah. And I do see people within the community just kind of drop in. They're like, oh yeah, it looks like there's money to be made here. I enjoy this. Let's make some money.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not wired that way.
I can tell.
Yeah. For better or worse, money doesn't motivate me at all.
What does motivate you?
I don't want to lose money because that has some downstream effects that are obviously very terrible, but it's not money. I am not out to make money. I'm out to make history. I love the thing itself. And
That's perfect.
Is what motivates me.
That was like my next question was going to be, what motivates you, and does it run deeper than competition?
It's not competition. I don't care at all how many bikes somebody else is selling.
That's awesome.
I don't care at all how big another company gets, how much money they make. I don't even pay any attention to that. When I see some company crop up or I see an advertisement for a bike or whatever, I immediately look at the product. Like, what is it? How does it work? What sort of power does it have? What sort of appeal does it have to people? How does it look? I want to know all those things because bringing a practical, beautiful, interesting thing into existence and giving that to people who would really enjoy it and benefit from it.
More gratifying than cash.
That's it. Yes, man.
I could tell, like I bet you, like if you saw like a kid riding one of these down the street, you're just like, little does that kid know that you're the one that engineered behind that, but like you're psyched because he just went flying by.
So yes. And our writers really helped make this worthwhile. The people who really believed in this and funded it through the Indiegogo.
Yeah.
And
how many of those have you had?
So the Indiegogo, we sold, I think it was like 33 bikes or something awesome. Like that. It wasn't
the titanium.
Yeah, the titanium.
Yeah,
bikes.
I mean, they're still a big deal. I mean, they're nice bikes.
Yeah, and it, It took us a full year to get those out, but that was pretty much what we promised. So, no one was disappointed.
And you're one man.
Okay.
Let's break it down real quick. I don't know if you can see the bike in the corner, but every single piece of that bike is built from the ground up by him. Everything you see there. Parts fully assembled in his shop. And before we even get and transition to the next part, I want you to kind of walk people through in as simplified terms as possible of what it takes to build that bike and the cell packs and what love and energy you put into it. I mean, you have a frame here. This is your new steel frame, and you have the titanium one over there. You want to walk people through it? You also have...
Okay. I can walk you through some of the design details of the frame itself. So if you just ignore this section right here, you have pretty much a normal 24-inch BMX frame with a cross between race and freestyle geometry, right? So, the rake here is slightly less aggressive than most freestyle bikes, but it's slightly more aggressive than most race bikes, right? So it's right in between. Bottom bracket is, basically parallel to your rear axle, so it's not super aggressive like some freestyle bikes. You see the bottom bracket's high, but otherwise pretty much a normal frame. What makes our frames unique, of course, is this center section here, which replaces the seat post. And what we have is these two plates, which are spaced a little over 60 millimeters apart to fit the in-runner motors that we designed to go in here. They just slide right in, and it's 4 bolts on this side. We use 2 bolts on this side, and that will go. A pulley system, a belt will go up to our custom transmission, and this, down here is the bottom bracket. We call this the upper bracket. And the transmissions that we make...
You make all those in-house, too.
We make these in-house, we have a manufacturing company that makes the parts, but we assemble everything because there's a sprag clutch mechanism on either side, so there's silent, instant engagement.
And you can see all this on his Instagram page. He shares a lot of these build-outs, and we're talking cell packs. He showed how he presses these motors all together, the clutch systems all together. I highly encourage you to check him out. I'll put his Instagram in the description below.
Yeah, this gearbox, we call it a transmission, but basically, on this side, that's the left side of the bike, right? So the side without the sprocket. When the motor spins, it spins this pulley via a belt, and then you can see on the other side, this transfers relatively high speed, low torque power into a lower speed, higher torque power. And this right here drives the chain that drives the rear wheel. You'll notice that this cog stays fixed because that attaches to your cranks and your bottom bracket. And you might wonder, why do it that way, right? Because a mid-drive, it's all compact and it's right there. But a mid-drive has a big chain wheel. And so the reduction system inside a mid-drive is actually much larger and heavier than this. And that means the motor in a mid-drive is much smaller. And we go the opposite direction. We can use a much larger motor. Our motor can take a lot of power, but a much smaller transmission because we have more mechanical efficiency. And that engagement there is silent and instant. And then if you want to pedal, notice you drive the cog that drives the rear wheel, but you don't drive the pulley system. It disengages because, again, it sprag clutches on either side. It's a simple setup, and if you ever needed to replace one of these, which hasn't happened yet and probably will be a while before it does, you saw it's a couple bolts, it slides out, you slide in a new one. That's because the system is made to be modular and easy to work on, because it's kind of a pet peeve of mine with these e-bikes. I think bikes should be easy to work on because working on your bike and customizing your bike is fun. And
you make it easy for people to customize, because even if they were to pick up a chromoly frame and not the titanium, they can still get titanium fork, because you make your own fork, your own bar, your own cranks.
Yeah.
I mean, your own stem. And do you have plans to make other parts in the future or other colorways? Because I know I've seen you toying with the idea of different finishes when it comes to the titanium.
Yeah, with the titanium cranks, since that's a standalone part that BMX riders are interested in, we offer anodization, any color of the titanium anodization you can do, which doesn't include red, for weird chemical reasons that
does it turn more pink? I guess it just kind of
you can
pink.
get pink, but you can't get red. So we do custom anodization, which is honestly really fun. It's like one of the funnest things that I do in the shop is do the anodization. And then we also do a custom Cerakote. We have a company here locally that does that for us. So we do black Cerakote, and we can do other colors. Building this thing out, we lace the wheels by hand, which, man, it's time consuming, but the quality control is so much better than doing the machine lace wheels. It's
those come unwound so fast.
They come unwound so fast, man.
Yeah.
And it's like people are going really fast on these things, and someone who doesn't maybe know how to work on bikes, I would prefer them to have like a well-built wheel.
Yeah. Everything about the bike's well built. Everything is high end. I mean, at this price point, you would be not getting parts like this. When it comes to the brakes you have on there, the design factor of this entire bike, I mean, it's, you put it perfect. It is a beautiful piece, but there's always room for your own customization and improvement, which I love about it because, there's different ways I've customized and made my bike my way. And there's some things that I love more about one or the other. Like I ride the skate park more on the Chromoly versus the titanium, but I find the titanium to be way more useful when I'm riding in the city. But that's also personal preference and what you plan on riding with a bike. When it comes to the batteries, so this is something that I kind of want to touch on because as we get further and further in the industry over the next year or so, there's more regulations that are popping up, and I feel like the UL certification is going to be something that is being pushed on brands that they have to do. Now, there are other certifications that are out there besides UL, but I feel like a lot of brands are wanting to have that UL sticker to be something that can show the customer as like a way to safeguard them. Are there is that something that would make or break Chimera, or is there ways that you can kind of let the customer know that you have a top-notch product to be able to seal the deal for them on that?
Well, so far, we've been able to seal the deal with customers that have any concerns about battery safety or battery performance simply because I'm extremely transparent about how the batteries are made.
What's your testing process like?
So basically, in the early days, I was just sort of spot welding cells together, and I understood how to do that safely, but I didn't quite understand the full safety of batteries long term.
Gotcha.
How to make a battery really last and be safe in a variety of conditions. But I linked up, I had some great conversations with Luke Workman, who is just a brilliant battery guy, who he was Zero Motorcycles. He was the battery guy there in the early days. And then now he runs his own company, Electric Goddess, and they do some incredible work. He has a full lab over there where he's doing some testing on all sorts of stuff. A lot of it's top secret, right? For agencies that you don't even know about, right? But in conversations with him, I learned so much about how just having a BMS doesn't necessarily make it safe, right? Just having it in a certain kind of case doesn't necessarily make it safe. Just passing UL certification doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to hold up against water and certain kinds of shock.
It's just a feel-good thing.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, those certifications do show that the battery does meet certain standards. But, he made me realize very early on a bike like this that people can potentially do some really crazy stuff on. You need something that'll go to the next level. And so what I decided to do was design and manufacture these molds. And you can see this on our YouTube and our Instagram, where we put in the cells. So we test all the cells for resistance and voltage. We would match them for resistance and make sure that they're not duds. And we only use the highest quality cells. We use Molicel or Samsung, depending on which pack we're building. We put the cells in these molds where we can put this thermal epoxy between each of the cells, about 2 millimeters between each cell. Now what that does is, if for some reason any cell were to erupt because it got punctured or damaged in some way, with the thermal epoxy between the cells, it's much less likely, and in testing this is shown, that fire caused from the one cell can propagate to the others, right? Now the fire from one cell is scary, but it's not going to burn down your house. Mm-hmm. And if you can keep it from propagating to those other cells, that's a great fire mitigation strategy. Mm-hmm. Now once I have that mold done, so I take that out and I've got a sort of long brick of cells that are epoxied together, I go ahead and spot weld it all up. I test each spot weld. I wire up the BMS. I take that and put it into an aluminum case. You notice these cases are, aluminum.
Able to take some impact.
Yeah, and there's a second round of epoxy where there's a whole layer that goes around the cell pack. And in that case, even if the fire were to propagate, then it would have a hard time getting out of the case. So that makes it much more puncture resistant, shock resistant, water resistant. And then, of course, we have fuses on both the input and output to make sure that if for some reason the wires get snipped and they cross, you'll have a quick pop and then the fuse gets popped instead of, I think there's a video of someone riding a Sur-Ron with like a homemade battery or whatever.
I saw that. And he just falls off of the bike.
Yeah, basically the connection, from what I understand, the connection, right, melted because it couldn't handle the current that they were pulling from it. And when it melted, the two wires crossed and there's no fuse. And so that's just fire spewing out, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen on a Chimera because of the way we make our batteries. There's no certification. But we show our customers exactly how those batteries are made. Right?
Do you believe do you believe that the UL certification will be something that's pressed on brands that they have to do in the coming future? Or do you just let's not talk about that because we don't want that to come true?
Let me answer that question slightly differently. If government agencies, either at the federal level or at the state level, were to try to force brands to pass UL certification, less fires would start overall. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
However, brands like mine would suffer and maybe even go under. And the reason why is because UL certification costs a fortune.
Yeah, I found that out today, that it can cost upwards of $30,000 to $40,000 depending on the battery pack you have. And I learned this from another brand where they have different battery packs for different bikes, and they have to spend $30,000 for one bike to have a UL certification because the battery's not the same as the other bike that they have. That's another $30,000.
Yep.
And it can be, that's why I was asking if it can make or break, because any startup, it can make or break a startup right now if you have multiple different bikes with different battery packs on them.
Yes. And so, like recently, we were using the P42A, the cell, right, for our 52 volt packs, and they were great. But then the P45B dropped just enough in price where we could switch to that higher performance cell. If we had to have UL certification, we would have had to go through a 3 to 6 month long process all over again, and it would have cost $30,000 to $40,000 to do that. There's no way we could have ever done that.
Yeah.
And that would happen anytime we want to make any kind of upgrade, right? That's bad for the customer, that's bad for us. Trying to figure out a way to force battery makers to make their batteries safe, I'm not opposed to that. Batteries need to be safe. These things are dangerous.
It's not just them too, because if you think of like New York City, you have a lot of people that are just making their own packs.
Yeah.
For one reason or another. It could be customization, could be because they don't have enough money to buy a $500 pack or more. And that kind of where I wanted to transition this into, what are your thoughts on the regulations behind the batteries when it comes to like cities like New York City are the ones kind of starting. And I asked this question to a couple people, and I wanted to hear your response. As well as when it comes to the battery task force that New York City has, where they're basically calling on the community to rat out people for having bikes that have homemade packs, or shops that are working on bikes that have homemade packs.
I think having citizens rat on each other is just bad in general. Like, I don't know. I don't want to get too political with that. You can, whatever your thoughts are, but that is something to think about with these sort of regulations. As a business owner, I should step back and just sort of look at it from that perspective. For the battery packs that are made by businesses or worked on by businesses, as I said, some kind of regulation to ensure that businesses aren't putting out packs that are going to hurt people. Well, that's a good thing, but forcing on a UL certification that costs far too much for small businesses to achieve, that seems like it's just going to really hurt the market.
Well, what I noticed, it wasn't just the UL certification that I think is the problem. What I've noticed in the stories is a lot of these businesses that are working on these bikes don't have the proper surge protectors or the way of, I've seen like so many chargers being plugged into one strip, all these batteries charging on one outlet, and it's like that could be one of the main causes for it.
I actually at don't want to say where it was, but at a show I saw a battery start on fire that was charging, and it was for the dumbest reason. They didn't have a proper BMS that would shut the battery off when it was overcharged, and they put the wrong charger on it.
I hate that.
And the fact that they had a charger that had the same connection, even though the voltages didn't match, like this was all like, there were 3 different things where I looked at it and I was like, this is ridiculous that they didn't have these safety. These are like basic safety features that cost virtually nothing to put in place. And there could maybe be a government agency or whatever to just make sure those sorts of measures are in place, and it's not going to cost $30,000 in 3 to 6 months, right? So I'm sure there's some alternative to forcing UL certification on businesses, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think about the regulations when it comes to a business is something like what I just said. Like I saw some bike shops around by us, they won't even accept working on an e-bike if it has a battery in it. So they want you to hold onto the battery. They'll work on your bike.
Interesting.
And then when you pick your bike back up, you can put your battery back in. Some businesses are having workarounds with that. But staying on the laws and kind of where things are shaping up, I kind of wanted to change gears a little bit and kind of talk about tariffs and how they hurt you in the past 4 years, and where do you see them going in the next 4 years? And have they really affected you? Because I know you outsource a lot of your parts, but you build your bikes here. Do you see it affecting you as a brand? I know it's going to affect the industry in some capacity. Well,
of course, now, when you ask me to predict like what the tariffs are going to be, I don't know. I don't know. When it comes to government agencies or the president or whoever else sort of negotiating these things and deciding these things, like maybe huge tariffs get passed, maybe they don't. So I don't know how to predict that. I don't know.
But as a business, like,
when
I was talking to another business owner, they said that you'd be dumb not to prepare for always the worst. So like right now, it's like 20 to 24% in tariffs is as of right now. So they're already preparing, like, okay, so when we write a check to bring our products in, we should always write a check thinking that we're going to have to write 30%, because you don't know what you always have to prepare for the next shipment in that case. And that's why I didn't know if it affected you like that when you're ordering your quantities.
Well, fortunately, we're ordering in such small quantities that they're produced more quickly, and we don't have to wait 6 months to a year to get a whole huge shipment, right? So that's helpful. It's also helpful that there's a lot of parts that we have that don't come from China, which is what the tariffs are really on. Like our frames, for example, we're working with a Taiwanese company.
Okay.
And Molicel comes from Taiwan, and our controllers come from Canada. And our brakes are McGurr. They're coming from I don't know where they're made, but they come through Germany, and that price is sort of fixed. But there are some parts that we're getting through China, as with any brand. And because of that, if tariffs increase, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. And of course, look, you never know if China takes over Taiwan, and then that's not a workaround. You might have to turn to American manufacturing. I personally would love that. But
do you think the people aren't ready for it?
Well, it takes a while to tool up and hire, right? If all of a sudden tariffs, skyrocket so much that we have to switch to an American manufacturing base. I mean, it'd be very cool to manufacture stuff here in the U.S. I would love to.
Yeah.
But right now it's astronomically expensive, and it's going to even get more expensive, if we're just there's a sort of gold rush in terms of like trying to manufacture everything here. So, when you ask me how it's going to affect, it's just like, I've got fingers crossed that the tariffs aren't going to skyrocket.
I'm hoping that it doesn't attack the e-mobility space at all. I would like to think that it's not going to hit the e-mobility space like people are predicting it's going to hit the auto industry.
Yeah.
But all we can do is kind of hope and speculate. Feel free to speculate in the comment section below.
Yeah.
Now, changing gears, maybe a little bit softer of a topic, the future.
Yeah.
Is there any plan to make any other parts or any other products in the e-mobility space, like mountain bikes or cruiser bikes or anything that's not a bike?
Yes.
We're just gonna leave it at that.
There are.
Come on, you gotta give us a hint.
Okay. Look, there's one more vehicle in the BMX space that we're looking to make. That's not a 24-inch, but that is different from what you might imagine. And then there's a vehicle outside of the BMX space that we're seriously considering. I've got some design ideas, and I think that might be the next move. The mountain bike space is tricky.
Right? I really think this would kill it in the mountain bike space.
Let me put it this way. The high drive system, that's what our system is called. We have a patent pending. It takes forever for the patent office to get through that stuff. But, I think it's perfect to set up a high pivot system with, the transmission and motor sort of pivoting with the shock system. But the R&D on that is actually a very heavy lift. Right? Okay. If we try to come out with that like in a year, it's not going to be right.
Yeah.
It's not going to be right. And look, you can see that I pride myself on my ability to jump into new things that I've never done before and come out, victorious. However, that's tough, man. Getting a shock absorbing high drive system that can handle the kind of abuse that a lot of these mountain bike guys are going to put on it and still transfer the power reliably, it's a heavy lift. And so even though I really want to do it, for those of you watching, I would prefer to have someone who is vastly experienced designing high pivot systems working with me so we can do it right.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be more e-BMX brands popping up in the near future? And if you do think so, what do you think they look like?
We've already had some copycats.
They kind of fizzle out too. But do you think that they kind of see? I mean, you're tough to compete with because a lot of the companies that I've seen come in and kind of fizzle out, they're priced too high for what they are. And they quickly realize that when they see what you offer, because they're sometimes priced even higher than what you're offering, and you offer a product 10 times better, from my personal experience.
Yeah, like when you say, do you see other electric BMX, companies come out, I'm like, well, what exactly do you mean by a BMX? Because I think...
I mean, it can look like a BMX. It may not ride like a BMX.
Exactly.
Now, I mean, like there are bikes that will have a BMX S to them, where it's like you pop on a Zoos, you'll feel like you're riding a BMX. It comes with a BMX, it has the heart in a way, make you feel like you're riding BMX. But then if you pop on, like I've ridden the Evolved, and my personal opinion on that, I don't think it's a well-made bike for what it is, comparative to you. But that's the closest thing I can compare to an electric BMX to what you have.
Yeah, I think there'll be plenty of brands that come and go, or, bigger brands that just have an electric BMX that has the BMX sort of like look and form factor and maybe a couple, BMX parts, like a pivotal seat or something. But ultimately it's just a hub drive and a battery slapped on, and it doesn't
feel.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a BMX, and, a couple bunny hops and something's popping off of it. So, a company that would really come along and try to compete with us in the BMX space, I kind of doubt it unless it's a company that
just
isn't
BMX.
Looking to make money, but is looking to make something awesome.
I think a company that's already a BMX established company would probably be the first to try to do it.
Maybe so. I think our next project, we might have something to offer them, so they don't have to.
Maybe, because I mean, if you think about it, that'd be cool. Because you think about it, you have like. Fingers Crossed BMX, when they came out with that full suspension BMX, and everybody was raving about it. Years and years go by, they still didn't produce one. And then I don't know if this is a fact, I don't know if they didn't get a patent on it or something. And then I see We the People has the Swamp, I think it's Swamp Master or something like that, come out, and it's like just like it, lower price point, and they're selling. Yeah. And that's not uncommon in the BMX world. I don't know if it's a patent issue or just people are just more cutthroat in the BMX world, but I haven't heard anything down the grapevine of anybody trying to do this kind of an electric BMX. You do have brands like Hyper Bikes that makes a hub drive, like you just said, but it's more of like a wheelie style bike. SE was toying with the idea of doing just a hub drive bike, but I don't think anybody's going to jump into that, or I don't think that they think that the industry is ready for the cheaper version, their style. I think the industry wants this, and I think you've had Ryan Williams on this bike. Yeah, he loved it. Yeah, he's killed it, done flips. I love this bike. Anybody that's in the BMX industry that's ridden my bikes, love them. And I think that this would be really hard to compete with, especially with the fact that, everything is, a lot of your existing BMX parts will work on this. Yeah, that's the best part about this. Yeah, we have a wider
wheelbase, the hubs.
I'm looking at the
Use wider
cranks, the
hubs.
sprocket, the seat, C-post, the stem, the handlebars. I mean, all these things are interchangeable with your everyday BMX.
Yep. And the 20-inch that I've got in mind.
I've toyed with the idea of putting 20s on. We talked about it.
But the 20-inch I have in mind will be even more compatible with just regular BMX wheels and things like that. But I got to do some work on that.
Yeah. I mean, I toyed with the idea. I had that little DIY one I made, and that's how we got connected. Just in case anybody's wondering how we got connected, I had a DIY electric BMX with it was like a little mid-drive bottom bracket motor I popped on there just to make for a fun video. And then the algorithm showed me Chimera. And I immediately was like, I got to see this. I got to check this thing out. And it's seriously the best version of what an electric BMX bike should be.
Thank you, man.
Seriously, I'm dead serious. It's like, I rave about it. Everybody's like, yo, man, have you seen the Chimeras? I'm like, yeah, I got 2 of them. Like, he hooked me up with 2 of them, and I'll never get rid of them, ever. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, it's one of my favorite bikes to ride. Seriously, one of my favorite bikes. And to close it out, what does the future of Chimera look like for you? And I know owning a business, it's like so hard to even think 5 years down the road, because it's really difficult to even think how drastically a business could change in 1 to 2 years. But take me down. What does 2 years to 3 years look like for you?
Well, I got some advice early on that sort of confirmed an outlook that I had for Chimera. I watched after the pandemic, whenever there was this rush on bikes, both regular bikes and e-bikes, right? I watched the industry just scale up. Like, people were buying inventory, and that looked to me like a mistake, because we had already launched, we were launching at that time. And to me, I was like, that looks like it's going to be fleeting. I don't know where it's going to go. Like, let's just work with the Indiegogo orders we have, and, just take orders and see what the market is demanding of us. And that has proven to be a really good strategy as I watch all these other brands crumble. Like, how many brands have declared bankruptcy in the last 6 months?
It's sad. A lot of brands that are like literally made the culture to what it is now. Yeah. It's sad. But are rumors that a couple of them might be coming back. In some forms.
And that's great, but they sort of shot for the moon without just sort of doing a gut check of like, wait a minute, how many people really want this product sort of consistently? Not right this second, in this, like, when there's a surge. And so my plan was to just grow slowly, make these in small batches, and see, what orders were like, what the customer base was like. And the advantage to that is the quality control is really high, and there's very little danger of having to declare bankruptcy because I've got, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested. Instead, it's smaller scale. So to take you 2 to 5 years down the line, we are slowly scaling up, right?
It's not a race.
Exactly.
You're not in competition with anyone, and when you become competitive in that nature, you're almost going to be rooting for your own demise.
Yeah.
In a way, Yeah. You start to lose the love for what you have going on versus doing what you do now. You're being real creative, and you have really sick products.
Thanks, man. I mean, the drawback, for the customer is it's a longer lead time because they have to place an order and have to wait on us to produce in small batches. But the advantage is, of course, they get like super high quality control and customer service from, the guy building the bikes.
Yeah.
So far that's worked out well for us. We will see in the next couple of years if I can handle bringing on some employees. We're working with the company in Taiwan that's making the frame. We're working with them to do some basic sub-assembly stuff. They go ahead and put on the motor and the transmission and a few things. They send it to us so we can quality control and do the rest and see how that works out. And as long as that works out, that enables us to scale a little bit more, right? Build some inventory, cut down on those lead times, but no big moves. I'm not making any big moves until I'm absolutely sure that we can do it, because I don't want to end up like one of these other companies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you sitting down with me, man.
This is great.
Awesome.
This is great as always.
Let everybody know where they can find you, and any last words.
Hit us up at Chimera Cycles on Instagram. Chimera BMX was taken, unfortunately. It's Chimera Cycles on Instagram. Chimera BMX virtually everywhere else. We got a Facebook, we got a YouTube, and of course we've got Chimera BMX and ChimeraCycles.com. We have both of those domains. Usually, if you hit us up on one of those channels, it's usually me answering the message. So you can talk to the guy who's like building the bikes, and I love engaging with customers or just people who are interested and want to nerd out about the bikes. So hit us up there. Other than that, I don't really have too many other remaining words, but unless other than to say, if you're on two wheels, you're a friend of mine. You don't have to be on a Chimera. Like, just if you're a biker, awesome.
Awesome. Let's do this again. Say 6 months.
Hell yeah, man. All right.
Yeah.